The keepers of Zephyria had sent their message into the void 300 cycles ago. Ambassador Thane pressed his six-fingered hand against the cool metal of the transmission chamber, watching the ancient machinery hum with desperate energy. The massive crystalline array stretched toward the stars, broadcasting their plea across the galaxy with every ounce of power their dying world could spare. Still no response, whispered Keeper Vera, her translucent skin flickering between blue and gray, the colors of hope fading into despair. The hegemony grows stronger with each passing day. Our children hide in the deep caves while their ships patrol our skies. Thane nodded grimly. The hegemony had already consumed 47 worlds in their sector. Each conquest followed the same brutal pattern: complete orbital bombardment, systematic extermination of resistance, and enslavement of survivors. The lucky ones died quickly. Perhaps we were wrong to believe anyone would answer, Vera continued, her voice barely audible above the transmission equipment. The galaxy has grown cold and silent. Every civilization looks only to their own survival. The message they broadcast was simple yet desperate. To any who hear this plea, we are the peaceful people of Zephyria. The hegemony comes to destroy us. We have no weapons, no armies, no hope. We offer what little we have, our knowledge of crystal technology, our star charts, our very lives, to anyone willing to stand against the darkness that spreads across the stars. Please, if there is still honor in this galaxy, if there is still courage in the hearts of any species, help us. Thane had written those words himself, pouring every ounce of his people's desperation into the transmission. The Zephyrians were healers, builders, gardeners of worlds. They had spent millennia cultivating life, sharing knowledge and spreading peace wherever their crystal ships could travel. Violence was so foreign to their nature that they possessed no words for warfare in their ancient language. The hegemony, however, understood only conquest. Their massive dreadnoughts were already 2 days' journey from Zephyria's outer rim. Intelligence reports suggested a fleet of 60 warships, each capable of cracking a planet's crust. The hegemony's Admiral Vex had sent his own message to Zephyria: surrender unconditionally or face complete annihilation. The outer sensors detect movement, announced Junior Keeper Knox, his young voice trembling, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Thane's heart sank. They were early. The hegemony had arrived ahead of schedule, crushing any remaining hope for rescue. He looked around the chamber at the dozen keepers who had volunteered to maintain the transmission until the very end. Each face showed the same resigned acceptance of their fate. How many ships? Thane asked, though he dreaded the answer. Knox's fingers danced across the sensor controls, his expression growing confused. Sir, the readings are strange. The ships appear to be hegemony design, but they're not following standard attack formations. They're drifting. Some appear to be damaged or completely powerless. Vara moved to the secondary sensor array, her skin shifting to a puzzled yellow hue. These readings can't be correct. The hegemony fleet shows massive hull breaches, disabled engines, and no life signs. It's as if they were destroyed before they could even enter our system. Destroyed by what? Thane demanded, rushing to the main view screen. The image that greeted him defied explanation. Hegemony dreadnoughts, each the size of a small city, drifted like broken toys through the void. Massive holes had been carved through their hulls with surgical precision. Emergency lights flickered weakly from a few vessels, but most were completely dark. Sir, Knox called out, his voice filled with wonder and terror. I'm detecting something else. Ships unlike anything in our databases. They appear to be watching us. The view screen shifted, focusing on the newcomers. Thane gasped. Sleek vessels of unknown design hung motionless among the wreckage of the hegemony fleet. They were smaller than the dreadnoughts, but radiated an aura of barely contained power. Their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them appear like holes in space itself. Are they scanning us? Vara asked. No active scans detected, Knox replied. They're just there, waiting. Then the communication array crackled to life with an incoming message. The voice that emerged was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever heard. Rough, filled with an ancient weariness, yet carrying an undertone of barely controlled fury. Zephyrian vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your transmission. We're sorry we're late, but we had to deal with some uninvited guests first. Thane stared at the speaker in shock. Terran? I've never heard of this species, the voice continued. We're humans from Earth. Our homeworld was destroyed by the hegemony 800 years ago. We've been hunting them ever since. Your message reached us in the outer rim and we came as fast as we could. Vera's skin cycled through a dozen colors, settling on a confused purple. But how did you destroy an entire hegemony fleet? Our intelligence indicated Admiral Vex commanded their most powerful battle group. A sound came through the communication array that took Thane a moment to recognize. Laughter. But it was cold, bitter laughter that spoke of centuries of pain and loss. Admiral Vex won't be bothering anyone anymore, Captain Chen replied. Neither will his fleet. The hegemony made a mistake when they destroyed Earth. They thought they had eliminated humanity. They were wrong. We don't die easily, and we don't forgive. Ever. Captain Chen, Thane said, finding his voice at last. We are grateful beyond words. But who are you? Where have you been all these centuries? We're what the hegemony created when they murdered our world, came the response. We're the ghosts of Earth, and we've been learning how to fight, how to kill, how to make sure no other world suffers what ours did. You called for help, Zephyrians. Well, help has arrived. Through the view screen, Thane watched as more human ships emerged from the darkness between stars. Not dozens, but hundreds. Each one bore the scars of countless battles, yet moved with deadly precision through the wreckage of what had once been the hegemony's most feared fleet. Permission to approach your world, Captain Chen requested. We have much to discuss, and the hegemony will send more ships when this fleet fails to report. But first, we need to make sure your people are safe. That's what we do now. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Thane looked around at his fellow keepers, seeing hope returning to their faces for the first time in cycles. They had called into the void expecting no answer. Instead, something impossible had responded. The ghosts of a dead world carrying the fury of humanity across the stars. Captain Sarah Chen materialized in the Zephyrian Council chamber through a transport beam that left no residual energy signature. Technology the crystal-skinned aliens had never seen before. She stood before them in armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid shadow, her face bearing the weathered lines of someone who had seen too much death and carried too much responsibility. Ambassador Thane studied the human female with fascination and growing unease. Her species looked remarkably similar to several humanoid races throughout the galaxy, yet there was something fundamentally different about her. Her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences no peaceful species could comprehend. When she moved, it was with the fluid precision of a predator, every gesture controlled and purposeful. 800 years, Keeper Vera whispered, her skin cycling through amazed golden hues. How is this possible? Our records show Earth's destruction was absolute. The hegemony used their planet crackers to shatter the entire world. Chen's expression darkened. They did. We watched our homeworld die from deep space installations, research stations, and colony ships, scattered across 50 systems. 3 billion humans were murdered in a single day. The hegemony thought they had eliminated our species because they couldn't understand us. They judged humanity by their own standards, centralized, dependent on homeworlds unable to adapt. She moved to the chamber's viewing port, gazing out at the drifting wreckage of the hegemony fleet. They were wrong. Humans are survivors. We're adaptable in ways that terrify other species. When Earth died, the scattered remnants of humanity didn't surrender or fade away. We evolved. We became something the galaxy had never seen before. A species without a home, united only by purpose. Thane leaned forward in his crystalline chair. What purpose? Vengeance, Chen replied without hesitation. Not the hot, quick anger that burns out in a generation. Cold, patient, methodical vengeance that spans centuries. We spent 800 years learning everything about the hegemony, their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. We infiltrated their society, studied their psychology, mapped every ship and station they possessed. She turned back to face the Zephyrian Council, and they collectively shuddered at the predatory smile that crossed her features. More importantly, we learned about every species they had conquered or planned to conquer. We've been watching you, Zephyrians, for the past 50 years. Your people, your culture, your technology. When your message reached us, we were already en route. You've been watching us? Farah's skin shifted to an alarmed orange. Protecting you, Chen corrected. 3 times in the past decade, hegemony scout fleets moved toward your system. 3 times those fleets mysteriously disappeared. Pirates, the official reports claimed. equipment failures, navigation errors. The hegemony never suspected that humanity was systematically dismantling their expansion efforts. Junior Keeper Knox, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up. But how? Your ships, your weapons? Nothing in our databases even approaches this level of technology. How did a species develop such capabilities in only 8 centuries? Chen's laugh was bitter. Only 8 centuries? Child, that's longer than most civilizations have existed. When you have nothing left to lose, when your entire species is reduced to refugees scattered across the void, you learn to innovate or die. We had the luxury of time and the motivation of absolute hatred. She gestured, and holographic displays filled the chamber, showing technical schematics that made the Zephyrians gasp. Ships that could phase through matter, weapons that could unmake atomic bonds, shields that existed in folded spacetime. We didn't just steal technology from the species the hegemony conquered, Chen explained. We improved it, combined it, evolved it beyond recognition. Every world they destroyed gave us new knowledge, new capabilities. The hegemony created their greatest enemy by teaching us that mercy is weakness, and survival requires absolute commitment. Thane studied the schematics with growing awe and horror. This level of advancement, what did it cost you? Chen's expression grew distant. Everything that made us human in the traditional sense. We don't have families anymore, we have operational units. We don't have homes. We have mobile bases that never remain in one location for more than a few months. We don't have individual lives, we have mission parameters that span multiple generations. She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. We've become what we needed to become to ensure the hegemony pays for what they did. Some would say we've become monsters. Perhaps they're right. But we're monsters with a purpose. And that purpose brought you to our aid, Thane said softly. The hegemony believes that strength comes from conquest, that survival means the elimination of all rivals, Chen replied. We've spent 8 centuries proving them wrong. True strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Real survival means ensuring that no other species suffers what humanity endured. Bara's skin had settled into a contemplative silver hue. What happens now? The hegemony will send more fleets when Admiral Vex fails to report. Let them come, Chen said with casual confidence. We've been preparing for this moment for 800 years. The hegemony's expansion stops here with your world. But we need your help. Our help? Knox sounded incredulous. We're healers, builders. We have no weapons, no military knowledge. You have something far more valuable, Chen replied. You have hope. You still believe that species can cooperate, can build something better than endless conquest. Humanity. We've forgotten how to hope. We know only how to fight. She activated another hologram, this one showing star charts spanning half the galaxy. Red markers indicated hegemony-controlled systems, while blue markers showed free worlds. The ratio was terrifyingly lopsided. We can destroy the hegemony, Chen continued. Our capabilities have advanced beyond their ability to counter. But destruction isn't enough. When the hegemony falls, the galaxy will need something to replace it, something better. We can tear down their empire, but we can't build what comes next. That requires species like yours, peaceful, cooperative, willing to see beyond their own immediate survival. Thane began to understand. You're asking us to help you not just win the war, but win the peace that follows. We're asking you to remember what we've forgotten, Chen said. How to live without hatred. How to build rather than destroy. How to be more than weapons pointed at an enemy. The chamber fell silent as the Zephyrians absorbed the magnitude of what Chen was proposing. They had called for rescue from a single threat, but humanity was offering them something far greater and more terrifying, a chance to reshape the galaxy itself. The choice is yours, Chen said finally. We'll protect your world regardless. The hegemony will never threaten Zephyria again, but if you're willing to help us, we can ensure they never threaten any world again. Through the viewing port, the dark shapes of human vessels continued their silent vigil among the wreckage of the hegemony fleet. Ghosts of a dead world, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy on their shoulders, waiting for an answer that would determine the fate of countless species yet to come. 3 days after their first meeting, Ambassador Thane found himself aboard the human flagship, a vessel so advanced it seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. Captain Chen had invited the Zephyrian delegation to witness something she called a demonstration of humanity's commitment. though her tone suggested it would be anything but pleasant. The human ship's corridors were unlike anything Thane had experienced. The walls seemed to pulse with their own life, organic curves blending seamlessly with crystalline matrices that hummed with barely contained energy. Most unsettling were the humans themselves, silent figures who moved through the ship like shadows, their faces marked by the same terrible weariness Chen carried. "How many of you are there?" Keeper Vara asked as they walked through the ship's central corridor. Her skin had remained a nervous yellow since boarding, despite Chen's assurances of their safety. "Active personnel? Approximately 40 million, Chen replied without emotion. "We're spread across 3,000 ships in 5 different galaxy arms. We haven't operated as a single fleet since the early centuries, too vulnerable to concentrated attack." Junior Keeper Knox, who had been scanning the ship's structure with wide-eyed amazement, suddenly stopped. 40 million? But your homeworld's population was in the billions. What happened to the others? Chen's step faltered for just a moment. The hegemony killed 3 billion on Earth. Disease, accidents, and combat claimed another billion over the centuries. Many simply gave up. When you live for nothing but vengeance, some people eventually lose the will to continue. They entered what Chen called the memory core, a vast chamber filled with crystalline pillars that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each pillar glowed with soft, ever-changing light, and Thane could sense massive amounts of data flowing through them. "Every human who has died since Earth's destruction is recorded here," Chen explained, her voice taking on an almost reverent tone. "Their thoughts, their memories, their knowledge. We refuse to let any part of our species truly die. Every innovation, every tactical insight, every moment of hope or despair, it's all preserved." Vara approached one of the pillars cautiously. "This is beautiful and terrible. You've turned your entire species into a monument to loss." "We've turned our species into a weapon," Chen corrected. "The distinction is important. Watch." She gestured to the central pillar, which began to project a holographic display showing real-time tactical information. Hundreds of red dots appeared across a star map, each representing a hegemony installation. Right now, human strike teams are simultaneously hitting hegemony supply depots, communication relays, and command centers across 17 sectors, Chen explained. Each team operates independently, but they're all coordinated through the memory core network. "We've become a hive mind dedicated to a single purpose, the destruction of the hegemony," Thane observed. "The liberation of the galaxy," Chen corrected again. "We learned early that simple destruction wasn't enough. The hegemony thrives on creating power vacuums that they can fill with their own forces, so we developed a different approach." The holographic display shifted, showing the aftermath of human raids. Instead of smoking ruins, Thane saw intact facilities being operated by their original crews, other alien species who had been enslaved by the hegemony. "We don't destroy infrastructure," Chen continued. "We eliminate hegemony leadership and return control to the original inhabitants. Sometimes they welcome freedom. Sometimes they've been conditioned to fear it, but we give them the choice their conquerors never did." Knox studied the tactical display with growing understanding. "You're not just fighting a war. You're orchestrating a galaxy-wide revolution. Now you begin to see the scope of what we're asking from Zephyria," Chen said. "When the hegemony falls, and it will fall within the next 50 years, hundreds of worlds will suddenly find themselves free for the first time in generations. They'll need guidance, support, examples of how peaceful species can coexist." She turned to face the Zephyrian delegation directly. "Humanity can teach them how to fight, how to defend themselves from future threats, but we can't teach them how to live. We've forgotten how to do anything but wage war." The memory core suddenly flashed with urgent red light, and Chen's expression grew grim. "Speak of the devils. It seems the hegemony has responded to the loss of Admiral Vex's fleet." The central display shifted to show long-range sensors detecting a massive fleet approaching Zephyrian space. Dozens of dreadnoughts accompanied by hundreds of smaller vessels, the largest hegemony force the delegation had ever seen. "Grand Admiral Krex himself," Chen observed with what might have been satisfaction. "The hegemony's supreme military commander. They're taking this personally now." Vara's skin had gone completely white with terror. "That fleet could destroy our entire system. All our worlds, all our people." "Not while we're here," Chen said firmly. "But this presents an opportunity. Krex has brought a significant portion of the hegemony's core fleet to your system. If we can eliminate him and his forces here, it will cripple their ability to respond to uprisings across the galaxy. She moved to a control interface that responded to her touch like a living thing. I'm going to show you something that will help you understand what humanity has become. Computer, display Operation Ghost Protocol. The chamber filled with tactical projections showing the positions of human ships throughout the Zephyrian system. What had appeared to be a modest rescue force was revealed as an intricate web of vessels hidden in asteroid fields, behind moons, and even within the system's star itself. We've had 300 ships in your system for the past month, Chen revealed. Stealth technology derived from 17 different conquered species, improved by 8 centuries of human innovation. The hegemony has no idea we're here. Thane felt a chill run through his crystalline bones. You've been planning this battle for a month? But our distress signal only went out 3 days ago. Your distress signal was irrelevant to our plans, Chen admitted. We've been preparing to face Krex's fleet for years. Your people were simply convenient bait to draw him into our trap. The admission hung in the air like a physical presence. Farah's skin cycled through shocked colors before settling on an angry red. You used us. Our entire world. Our people's lives. We were just a lure for your trap. Yes, Chen said without apology. And because of that, your world will be saved and the hegemony will suffer its greatest defeat in centuries. Would you prefer we had let Krex choose his own battleground, his own timing? How many more worlds would have burned while we waited for a better opportunity? Nox looked between the human captain and his fellow Zephyrians. This is what 8 centuries of war has done to your species. You think like them now? Like the hegemony? Chen's expression grew cold. We think like predators because we hunt predators. The difference is what we do with our victories. The hegemony conquers and enslaves. We eliminate threats and restore freedom. The methods may be similar, but the goals are completely different. She gestured to the tactical display, where Krex's fleet was now only hours away from engagement range. Judge us by our results, not our methods. When this battle is over, Zephyria will be free. The hegemony will be broken, and you'll have a choice. Help us build something better from the ashes, or watch the galaxy tear itself apart in the power vacuum that follows. The memory core pulsed with increasing intensity as human ships throughout the system prepared for battle. Thane realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, an entire species that had transformed itself into a weapon, pointed not at conquest but at liberation. The hegemony created us, Chen said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. They turned humanity into something the galaxy has never seen before. Now they're going to learn exactly what they unleashed when they murdered our world. Through the ship's viewports, the first flashes of distant weapons fire began to appear as human vessels emerged from hiding to engage the massive hegemony fleet. The battle for Zephiria's freedom and the galaxy's future had begun. Grand Admiral Krex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Edge, watching his tactical displays with growing confusion and rage. His massive fleet of 200 vessels had been specifically assembled to crush the mysterious force that had destroyed Admiral Vex. The intelligence reports had suggested perhaps 20 unknown ships, easily manageable for the hegemony's most powerful battle. Group, the reality was far more terrifying. Report. Krex's 4-armed form towered over his bridge crew, his chitinous exoskeleton darkening with fury. The Grand Admiral had spent 3 centuries building the hegemony's military might, perfecting tactics that had conquered 47 worlds. No force in the galaxy should have been able to challenge his fleet's supremacy. Sir, enemy contacts are appearing throughout the system, his tactical officer reported, her voice trembling. They're emerging from stealth and asteroid fields, from behind planetary bodies, even from within the system's corona. Current count is 317 vessels. Impossible, Krex snarled. No species has the technology to hide that many ships. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. On the human flagship, Captain Chen watched the battle unfold with the cold satisfaction of someone whose plans were proceeding perfectly. The Zephyrian delegation stood beside her in horrified fascination as human vessels systematically dismantled the hegemony fleet with surgical precision. Your ships move like they're alive, Vera whispered, her skin shifting through amazed silver hues. The human vessels flowed through space like schools of predatory fish, coordinating their attacks without any visible communication. In a sense, They are, Chen replied. Each ship carries a fragment of the memory core. They share tactical information instantaneously, adapt to changing conditions collectively. The hegemony still thinks in terms of hierarchical command structures. We think as a unified organism. Ambassador Thane watched in awe as a squadron of human ships performed an impossible maneuver, phasing through solid matter to emerge inside a hegemony dreadnought's shields. That's not possible. Energy shields should prevent matter transmission. Conventional shields, yes, Chen agreed. But we learned to manipulate dimensional barriers from the Vex-High before the hegemony exterminated them. Combined with quantum tunneling, technology from the Zoran Collective and phase variants, calculations from the eternal libraries of Quiche, all conquered, species whose knowledge now serves a better purpose. The human ships weren't just fighting. They were demonstrating 8 centuries of accumulated knowledge from dozens of destroyed civilizations. Every weapon, every defensive system, every tactical innovation that the hegemony had encountered during their expansion was now turned against them with devastating effect. Junior, Keeper Knox pointed to a section of the tactical display where human ships seemed to be deliberately hurting hegemony vessels. Why aren't they destroying those ships? They have clear kill shots. Because those vessels contain slave crews from conquered worlds, Chen explained. The hegemony forces other species to maintain their ships, fight their battles. We're not here to punish the victims. Even as she spoke, Thane watched human boarding parties materialize aboard the herded vessels. The actions that followed were precise and methodical. Hegemony officers eliminated, slave crews liberated, ship systems reprogrammed to serve their original builders. You're not just winning a battle, Thane realized. You're liberating an entire fleet. Every hegemony vessel contains technology stolen from conquered species, operated by enslaved crews, Chen confirmed. When we're finished here, those ships will return to their homeworlds carrying news of the hegemony's defeat and the knowledge needed to resist future invasion. On the Dominion's edge, Grand Admiral Krex was beginning to understand the true scope of the disaster unfolding around him. His fleet wasn't just being defeated, it was being systematically disassembled and repurposed by an enemy that seemed to know every weakness, every tactical doctrine, every technological system the hegemony possessed. Sir, they're not just destroying our ships, his communications officer reported in growing panic. They're stealing them, converting them. Some of our own vessels are now firing on us with weapons we've never seen before. Krex's tactical display showed the horrifying truth. Human forces had captured over 60 hegemony ships and were somehow upgrading their capabilities in real time. Vessels that had been standard dreadnoughts minutes before now moved with impossible speed and fired weapons that cut through hegemony shields like paper. What are these beings? Krex demanded. What species could develop such capabilities? His answer came in the form of a direct communication from the human flagship. Captain Chen's image appeared on the main screen, her weathered face displaying the cold satisfaction of someone whose long-planned vengeance was finally bearing fruit. Grand Admiral Krex, Chen said, her voice carrying across the void with crystal clarity. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the human species. Perhaps you remember us? You destroyed our homeworld 800 years ago. Krex's exoskeleton went pale. Humans? But Earth was completely destroyed. Your species was eliminated. Your people made that mistake once before, Chen replied. You judged us by your own limitations. You couldn't imagine a species surviving without a homeworld, thriving without central authority, growing stronger through dispersal rather than concentration, she gestured. And the tactical display showed the true scope of human forces throughout the galaxy. Thousands of ships, millions of personnel, centuries of preparation, all focused on this single moment. We've spent 800 years learning everything about you, Chen continued. Your tactics, your technology, your psychology. We've infiltrated your society, studied your weaknesses, prepared for this confrontation. You created your own destruction the day you murdered our world. Krex watched his fleet crumble around him. Decades of military dominance evaporating in the face of an enemy that fought like nothing he had ever encountered. What do you want? Terms of surrender? Territorial concessions? Chen's laugh was as cold as the void between stars. We want what you took from us. Justice for 3 billion murdered humans and countless other species your empire has destroyed. But we're not you, Admiral. We don't slaughter helplessly. She gestured again, and escape pods began launching from the captured hegemony vessels. Your crews will be delivered to neutral worlds with evidence of your empire's crimes. Let them carry word back to your core systems that the age of hegemony expansion is over. This is impossible, Krex snarled. One battle cannot destroy an empire that spans half the galaxy. You're right, Chen agreed. But this isn't one battle. It's the culmination of 800 years of preparation. While we've been talking, human forces have simultaneously struck every major hegemony installation across 17 sectors. Your communication networks are down. Your supply lines are severed. Your reserve fleets are engaging human forces that seem to appear from nowhere. The Grand Admiral's bridge crew stared at their displays in growing horror as reports flooded in from across hegemony space. Everywhere the pattern was the same. Devastating attacks by unknown forces, installations captured rather than destroyed, slave species liberated and armed with advanced technology. The hegemony dies today, Chen said with finality. The only question is whether its leadership chooses to die with it or adapts to a galaxy where conquest is no longer profitable. Krex's flagship shuddered as human vessels surrounded it, their weapons powered but not yet firing. Through the viewports he could see escape pods carrying his crew to safety, while human boarding parties prepared to take control of his ship. 800 years, he whispered, finally understanding the scope of the trap he had walked into. You've been planning this for 800 years. We've been preparing for this moment since the day we watched our homeworld burn, Chen confirmed. Now you get to live with the consequences of creating a species that has nothing left to lose in 8 centuries to plan your downfall. The, last of Krex's escort vessels surrendered as human forces completed their capture of the entire hegemony fleet. In the space of 6 hours, the most powerful military force in the galaxy had been neutralized without a single human casualty, a demonstration of technological and tactical superiority that would send shockwaves across every inhabited system. The age of the hegemony was ending, and humanity's long-awaited revenge had finally begun. In the aftermath of the battle, the Zephyrian system had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a graveyard of tyranny and a birthplace of hope simultaneously. Captured hegemony vessels hung in orbit around every major planet, their former slave crews working alongside human technicians to retrofit the ships with liberating technology rather than conquering weapons. Ambassador Thane stood in the observation deck of the human flagship, watching crews of a dozen different species collaborate on repairs and upgrades. Each group wore clothing and insignia from their homeworlds, many of which had been under hegemony control for generations. The sight should have been inspiring, but Thane found himself deeply troubled by what he was witnessing. "They're afraid of you," he said to Captain Chen, who stood beside him reviewing tactical reports on a translucent display. "The liberated crews, the freed slaves, they work efficiently, but they watch your people with the same fear they once showed their hegemony overseers." Chen didn't look up from her reports. Fear isn't always negative. Healthy fear of those with superior firepower prevents conflicts. These people have spent their entire lives under authoritarian rule. They don't understand cooperation, only dominance hierarchies. "That's exactly what concerns me," Thane replied. "You've defeated the hegemony, but what are you replacing it with? Another empire ruled through intimidation and superior technology?" For the first time since the battle, Chen's composure seemed to crack slightly. She dismissed her display and turned to face the Zephyrian ambassador directly. "What would you have us do? We could have left you all to die. The hegemony would have continued expanding, enslaving species after species until the entire galaxy bent to their will." "I'm not questioning your motives," Thane said carefully. "I'm questioning your methods. Your people have become so focused on defeating the hegemony that you've forgotten how to exist without an enemy to fight." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Keeper Vara and Junior Keeper Knox, both carrying data tablets filled with information they had gathered from the liberated crews. Vara's skin displayed the deep blue patterns that indicated serious concern. "We've been conducting interviews with the freed personnel," Vara reported. "The stories they tell. Ambassador, some of these people have never known freedom. Their grandparents were enslaved by the hegemony. They literally don't understand concepts like self-governance or voluntary cooperation." Knox added his own disturbing observations. Worse, many of them are asking the humans when they'll be assigned new duties, new masters. They can't comprehend that they're actually free to make their own choices. Chen's expression grew distant. We anticipated this problem. Social conditioning spanning multiple generations isn't easily reversed. That's why we need species like yours to help with the transition. But that's not the real problem, Thane said, his crystalline features reflecting the starlight streaming through the observation port. The real problem is that your people have the same conditioning, just pointing in the opposite direction. You've spent 8 centuries defining yourselves entirely by your opposition to the hegemony. What happens to humanity when that opposition is no longer necessary? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Chen stared out at the captured fleet, and for a moment, Thane caught a glimpse of something unexpected in her expression. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. We haven't had time to consider that question, Chen admitted quietly. Every human alive today was raised with a single purpose, the destruction of the hegemony. It's not just our mission, it's our identity. Without that purpose, you become lost, Thane finished. Just like the people you've liberated. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the human vessel. Memorial's Edge, Commander. David Park's image appeared in a holographic display, his young face bearing the same weary intensity that marked all humans. Captain Chen, we're receiving reports from strike teams across hegemony space, Park announced. The simultaneous attacks were completely successful. 97% of targeted installations have been captured or neutralized. Hegemony Central Command is in complete disarray. Casualties, Chen asked. Minimal on our side. The hegemony forces were unprepared for coordinated attacks of this scope. However, we're encountering the same problem reported from the Zephyrian system. Liberated populations don't know how to function without authoritarian oversight. Chen nodded grimly. Implement Protocol 7. Establish provisional administrations with local representatives, but maintain human oversight until stable governments can be formed. After Park signed off, Thane turned to Chen with growing alarm. Protocol 7? You're establishing military governments across former hegemony territory. Temporary administrations, Chen corrected. These people need structure, guidance. Without it, many of these worlds will descend into chaos or fall prey to opportunistic warlords. Or they'll trade one set of masters for another, Vera observed, her skin now displaying the yellow patterns of deep concern. Captain, with respect, your species has forgotten how to trust others to govern themselves. Chen's jaw tightened. We've forgotten many things, but we remember how to protect people who can't protect themselves. Would you prefer we abandon them to figure out freedom on their own while opportunists and tyrants move in to fill the power vacuum? Knox stepped forward, his young features determined. There's a third option. Let us help. You? Chen looked skeptical. The Zephyrians are peaceful builders, not governors or military leaders. Exactly, Thane said, beginning to understand where Knox was leading. We know how to cooperate without dominance, how to build consensus rather than impose authority, how to guide without controlling. Vera's skin brightened to an encouraging green. Our species has maintained stable, cooperative governments for over 1,000 years. We've helped other peaceful species establish similar systems. We could work with the liberated populations to develop self-governance gradually. Chen considered this proposal, but her expression remained doubtful. These aren't peaceful species discovering cooperation for the first time. These are traumatized populations emerging from generations of authoritarian rule. They need firm guidance, clear structure. They need hope, Thane countered. They need to see that freedom means more than simply having different masters. Your people can provide security and protection, but you can't provide the vision of what peaceful coexistence looks like. For several minutes, Chen stood silent, staring out at the mixed crews working on the captured vessels. Finally, she activated her communication system and contacted human commanders across the former hegemony territory. All units. This is Captain Chen. We're implementing a modified version of Protocol 7. Human forces will provide security and technological support, but civilian administration will be transferred to Zephyrian coordinators as quickly as possible. We're liberators, not conquerors. Let's make sure the galaxy understands the difference. As the new orders were transmitted across space, Thane felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. Humanity had proven they could destroy tyranny, but the harder task lay ahead, helping the galaxy learn to live without it. You're taking an enormous risk, Chen said to the Zephyrian delegation. These populations could reject your guidance, rebel against any form of authority, or fall into chaos despite your best efforts. Freedom is always a risk, Thane replied, but it's a risk worth taking. The alternative is replacing the hegemony with something just as controlling, even if it's more benevolent. Through the viewport, they watched as Zephyrian crystal ships began arriving in the system, their holds filled with diplomats, teachers, and social coordinators. The real work of liberation was just beginning, and its outcome would determine whether humanity's 8th-century quest for vengeance would ultimately birth freedom or simply create a new form of empire. 6 months after the fall of the hegemony, Captain Sarah Chen found herself in a place she had never expected to be, sitting in a classroom on the Zephyrian world of Crystal Falls, learning about peaceful governance from beings who had never known war. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity's greatest warriors were now students again, struggling to understand concepts that their 8th-century quest for vengeance had nearly erased from their collective memory. Consensus. Building isn't about finding the perfect solution, explained Instructor Melody, an elderly Zephyrian whose skin displayed the deep blue patterns of ancient wisdom. It's about finding a solution that everyone can live with, even if it's not their first choice. Chen shifted uncomfortably in her chair, which had been specially designed to accommodate human physiology. Around her sat 30 other human commanders, officers who had spent their entire lives making split-second decisions that meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The concept of extended deliberation, of compromise and gradual consensus felt alien to their nature. But what if the consensus is wrong? Asked Commander Park, his voice carrying the frustration that many humans felt with this new reality. What if the group decides on a course of action that will clearly lead to disaster? Melody's skin rippled with amused green patterns. Then they learn from their mistakes and make better decisions next time. Freedom includes the right to make errors, Commander. Without that right, you don't have citizens, you have subjects. Chen understood the logic, but everything in her training rebelled against it. Human military doctrine emphasized rapid decision-making, clear command structures, and the elimination of inefficiency. The idea of allowing potentially harmful decisions to proceed for the sake of preserving autonomy felt like abandoning her responsibility to protect people. The classroom session was interrupted by a communication from Ambassador Thane, whose image appeared in a holographic display. His crystalline features showed the strain of the past months, during which he had been coordinating liberation efforts across 47 former hegemony worlds. Captain Chen, we have a situation developing on Corvain Prime, Thane reported. The local population has rejected Zephyrian guidance and is demanding immediate independence. They're threatening to attack any human forces that remain in their system. Chen immediately stood, her military instincts taking over. Threat assessment? Are they capable of following through on these threats? They have access to captured hegemony weapons and several dozen retrofitted warships, Thane admitted. More concerning, they're being influenced by a faction that believes all off-world species are potential conquerors. They're calling for complete isolation and the forcible removal of any non-Corvain beings from their territory, including the Zephyrian coordinators who are helping them establish stable governance, Chen asked, her expression growing cold. Especially them, Thane confirmed. The faction leaders are convinced that any form of guidance is simply a new type of domination. They want to figure out freedom entirely on their own, regardless of the consequences. Chen felt the familiar surge of tactical thinking, the rapid analysis of threats and countermeasures that had become second nature over 8 centuries of warfare. Deployment time to Corvain Prime is 18 hours. We can have a full battle group in position before they can organize any significant resistance. Captain, Instructor Melody interrupted gently. Perhaps this is an opportunity to practice what we've been discussing. How might consensus building apply to this situation? Chen turned to face the Zephyrian instructor, her expression incredulous. They're threatening to attack peaceful coordinators who are trying to help them. This isn't a situation for committee meetings and gradual compromise. This is a security threat that requires immediate action. And what kind of action do you propose? Thane asked through the communication link. Chen's response was immediate and precise. Surgical strike on their leadership. Disable their weapons systems. Establish a protective perimeter around Zephyrian personnel. Remove the threat quickly and efficiently before it can spread to other liberated worlds. The classroom fell silent. Around her, the other human officers nodded in agreement. Chen's assessment matched their own instinctive responses. But Melody's skin had shifted to the deep purple patterns that indicated profound disappointment. "Captain," Melody said softly, "you've just described exactly how the hegemony would have handled this situation." The words hit Chen like a physical blow. She stared at the elderly Zephyrian, seeing her own reflection in the being's large, compassionate eyes. In that moment, she realized how easy it would be for humanity to become the very thing they had fought against. "The Corvain people have the right to make mistakes," Thane added gently. "Even terrible mistakes. Even mistakes that might harm themselves or others. If we use force to prevent them from exercising that right, we're not liberators. We're conquerors with better intentions." Commander Park voiced what many of the humans were thinking. "So we just let them attack peaceful civilians? Let them descend into chaos because it's their right to do so?" "We find a third option," Melody replied. "One that respects their autonomy while still protecting innocent lives. This is why consensus building takes time, why it requires patience and creativity. The obvious solutions are often not the best solutions." Chen forced herself to sit back down, to think beyond her military training. "What do you suggest?" "The Corvain people are afraid," Thane explained. "They've spent 3 generations under hegemony rule, where any outside influence meant exploitation and oppression. They see our help as a potential trap, another form of control disguised as assistance. So we prove them wrong," Chen said slowly, beginning to understand. "We withdraw all human forces from their system. Complete withdrawal, making it clear that we respect their right to independence." "And leave the Zephyrian coordinators to fend for themselves?" Park asked. "We evacuate any coordinator who wants to leave," Chen continued, working through the implications. "But we also make it clear that those who remain do so as individuals, not as representatives of any government or organization. They stay because they choose to help, not because they were ordered to." Melody's skin brightened to an approving yellow. "And if the Corvain people attack them anyway?" Chen felt her military instincts surge again, but forced herself to think more carefully. "Then we broadcast what happens to the rest of the galaxy. Show everyone what happens when fear overcomes reason, when isolation is chosen over cooperation." "You'd let people die to make a political point?" Park demanded. "No," Chen replied, her voice heavy with the weight of difficult decisions. "We'd let people choose their own fate, even if we disagree with their choices. That's what freedom means." Thane's expression showed both approval and sadness. "The Zephyrian coordinators on Corvain Prime have already made their choice. 12 of them have chosen to remain, knowing the risks. They believe that someone needs to be available if the Corvain people eventually decide they want help. And if those coordinators are killed, then they'll have died as martyrs to the principle that every species deserves the chance to learn from its own mistakes," Thane replied. "It's not a perfect solution, Captain, but it's a free solution." Chen activated her communication system and began issuing orders that went against every instinct she possessed. Human forces would withdraw from Corvain Prime. Zephyrian coordinators would be given the choice to evacuate or remain as private individuals. The Corvain people would be left to determine their own destiny, whatever the consequences. As the orders went out, Chen realized that learning to live without the hegemony was going to be far more difficult than destroying it had been. For 8 centuries, humanity had known exactly who they were and what they needed to do. Now they faced the challenge of rediscovering what it meant to be human in a galaxy where the old certainties no longer applied. The war was over, but the harder battle for the soul of the galaxy was just beginning. 10 years after the fall of the hegemony, Ambassador Thane stood in the Memorial Garden on New Geneva, humanity's first permanent settlement since the destruction of Earth. The crystalline trees around him hummed with gentle harmonics, their growth guided by both Zephyrian botanical knowledge and human engineering. A perfect symbol of what the galaxy had become. Before him stretched a vast memorial wall, its dark surface inscribed with the names of every human who had died since Earth's destruction. 3 billion names from the homeworld's final day. Another billion from the centuries of wandering and warfare that followed. Each name glowed softly, powered by energy drawn from the living trees around them. "I never expected to outlive our purpose," said Captain Sarah Chen, approaching the memorial with steps that had grown heavier over the years. At 68, she was among the oldest surviving humans, one of the few who remembered the early decades after Earth's fall. "Your purpose evolved," Thane replied, his own crystalline features showing the accumulated wisdom of age. You went from being warriors to being guardians, from conquerors of tyranny to protectors of freedom. Chen touched one of the names on the wall. Marcus Chen, her great-grandfather who had died in the first hegemony attack on Earth. Sometimes I wonder if he would recognize what we've become, if any of them would. Around them, the sounds of construction echoed through the settlement. New Geneva was growing rapidly, its population swelling with humans who were learning to live permanently in one place for the first time in centuries. The psychological adjustment had been difficult for many. Entire generations had known only the nomadic existence of the fleet, the constant movement from system to system. The Corvain situation resolved itself, eventually, Thane reported, updating Chen on one of their ongoing concerns. It took 3 years of complete isolation, but they finally asked for Zephyrian assistance. Their population had dropped by 30% due to civil conflicts and resource mismanagement. And the coordinators who stayed? 5 survived. They spent those 3 years in hiding, maintaining secret schools for Corvain children whose parents wanted them educated in galactic knowledge. When the government finally collapsed, those children became the foundation of the new administration. Chen nodded slowly. The Corvain crisis had become a template for handling similar situations across the former hegemony territory. Sometimes freedom meant allowing species to make devastating mistakes, but it also meant being available to help when they realized they needed assistance. How many worlds have achieved stable self-governance? Chen asked. 31 of the original 47, Thane replied. 12 are still in transition with varying degrees of Zephyrian guidance. 4 have requested continued human protection due to external threats from unconquered space. They walked together through the memorial garden, past sections dedicated to different periods of human history. The early Exodus years, marked by desperate adaptation and frequent tragedy. The middle centuries, when humanity had transformed itself into a weapon of liberation. The recent decade when they had struggled to remember how to be more than warriors. The younger generation doesn't understand, Chen said, gesturing toward a group of human children playing among the memorial trees. To them, this is just history. They've never known the hunger for vengeance that drove us for 8 centuries. Some of them are even questioning whether Earth's destruction was as significant as we've taught them. Is that necessarily bad? Thane asked carefully. Chen stopped walking, her expression troubled. I don't know. Without that shared purpose, that common memory of loss, what holds humanity together? What defines us as a species? Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Park, now Admiral Park, and the Chief Administrator of New Geneva. His once young face bore the lines of someone who had transitioned from military leadership to civilian governance, a change that had challenged every human survivor. Captain Ambassador, Park greeted them. I wanted to inform you that the Galactic Assembly has officially voted to establish the Terran Peacekeeping Service as a permanent institution. 43 worlds have signed the charter. Peacekeeping, Chen mused. Not conquest, not liberation, peacekeeping. The galaxy has learned to fear war, Park explained. Not just hegemony-style conquest, but any form of large-scale conflict. They've seen what happens when militaristic species gain too much power. They want humanity to serve as a counterbalance, a force that can intervene when peaceful solutions fail, but which is bound by galactic law and international oversight. Thane's skin displayed pleased blue patterns. A military force that serves the community rather than national interests. It's an elegant solution to the problem of how to maintain human purpose without recreating the conditions that led to the hegemony. Some of our people aren't happy about it, Park admitted. They argue that subjecting human forces to alien oversight dishonors the memory of our fallen. They want us to remain independent, beholden to no authority but our own. Chen understood the sentiment. For 8 centuries, humanity had operated without external constraints, guided only by their own moral compass and tactical judgment. The idea of answering to galactic authorities felt like a betrayal of their hard-won independence. What's your recommendation, Admiral? Chen asked. I think we join, Park replied without hesitation. Not because we need their oversight, but because they need to see that power can be voluntarily limited. Every species in the galaxy is watching to see whether humanity will become the next hegemon or something genuinely different. They walked in silence to the center of the memorial garden, where a single crystal tree grew larger than all the others. Its branches stretched toward the sky, each leaf inscribed with a different human value: courage, sacrifice, protection, justice, freedom. At its base, an inscription read, "To those who died so that others might live free." "The ghosts of Earth," Chen said softly, touching the tree's crystalline bark. "That's what we became. Spirits of the dead, haunting the galaxy until justice was served." "And now?" Thane asked. Chen looked around at the growing settlement, at the children playing among the memorials, at the mixed crews of humans and aliens working together on construction projects. "Now we have to learn to be something more than ghosts. We have to become a living species again." A communication alert interrupted their contemplation. The message was from the Outer Rim territories, where human peacekeeping forces were monitoring a territorial dispute between two recently liberated species. Not a crisis requiring immediate military intervention, but a situation where careful diplomacy and the implicit threat of human involvement might prevent a war. "The work continues," Park observed. "Different work than we've done before, but still necessary." Chen activated her communication device to respond to the alert, then paused. For 800 years, human responses had been swift, decisive, and often final. Now they had the luxury of consultation, of careful consideration, of seeking multiple perspectives before acting. "Admiral Park, contact the Zephyrian Diplomatic Corps," she ordered. "Request a joint consultation on the Rim Territories situation. Also reach out to the Corvain peace negotiators. They've developed some interesting techniques for resolving resource conflicts." "Asking for help," Park noted with a slight smile. "The old you would have dispatched a battle group and sorted out the problem in a few hours." "The old me lived in a simpler galaxy," Chen replied. "One where there were clear enemies and obvious solutions. This new galaxy requires different skills, different approaches." As the sun set over New Geneva, painting the memorial trees in golden light, Chen realized that humanity's greatest victory wasn't the defeat of the hegemony. It was the species' ability to evolve beyond the circumstances that had created them, to become something more than the sum of their losses and their anger. The ghosts of Earth had finally found peace not in vengeance, but in the simple act of protecting others who couldn't protect themselves. It was perhaps what Earth would have wanted all along, for its children to survive, to grow, and to make the galaxy a little bit safer for everyone. In the end, that was the most human thing of all: to endure, to adapt, and to ensure that others never suffered the same losses that had forged humanity into something stronger than any empire the galaxy had ever known.